And hello again from Fox News. Today at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. This is the agency's iconic entrance here with the CIA seal. In this complex, thousands of officers work around the clock, collecting intelligence and directing covert operations to protect the U.S. from foreign threats. But while the CIA is the stuff of spy movies and Tom Clancy novels, in real life the agency has a unique insight into what's happening in hotspots around the world. Today we take you inside for a rare and exclusive interview with the man who heads the spy agency, Director John Brennan. Director, we're here in the CIA's private museum. Tell us about this model next to us.
Well, first of all, welcome, Chris, to our museum that we're quite proud of. And this is the model of the compound in Abbottabad that Osama bin Laden was hiding for a number of years. And that was the site of the takedown of bin Laden. But despite the detail that you see on the outside, there's still a lot that we didn't know at the time as far as the inside of the building and what bin Laden and his cohorts might have planned in terms of blowing up the building and confronting any type of force that would come in.
Let's talk about a current threat, Iran. What if the talks fall apart and there is no deal? What's your best intelligence? Will Iran race to develop a nuclear weapon, or are they more likely to go back to where they were before the talks, just a couple of months short of breakout?
The nuclear program is one issue that we're hoping to be able to halt. But also we see that Iran is still a state sponsor of terrorism. And so what we have to do, whether there's a deal or not, is to continue to keep pressure on Iran and to make sure that it is not able to continue to destabilize a number of the countries in the region.
I want to get into that in a moment, but on the deal, what's your guess what happens if there is no deal? Do they break out, or do they stay just short of that?
I think they realize that there's going to be tremendous costs and consequences and implications if they were to decide to go for a breakout. There are a number of things that the United States has available to it to prevent Iran from getting a bomb. President Obama has made it very clear that we are going to prevent Iran from having that type of nuclear weapon that they were going on the track to obtain. So if they decide to go down that route, they know that they will do so at their peril.
On the other hand, if there is a deal, the big question is, can we verify that Iran is living up to that deal? Here's what Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu told Congress.
Iran not only defies inspectors, it also plays a pretty good game of hide and cheat with them.
Question, how confident are you that between the new inspections regime under the agreement and your intelligence in the area, that you would be able to ensure that Iran was not secretly building a nuclear weapon?
It's not a question of trusting the Iranians on this. And I know that Secretary Kerry and President Obama are comfortable with what it is that we are insisting on as far as that verification regime.
But frankly, our track record when it comes to Iran and its nuclear program is not good. Iranian opposition groups in 2002 were the ones that revealed that the regime had secret facilities at Natanz and Iraq. One of your predecessors, Michael Hayden, says that they had done a lot of work at Fordo before we knew about it. Fact is, they've fooled us repeatedly, the Iranians.
And I think we've gone to school on some of those developments over the last decade or so that we can now have a better plan and opportunity to verify some of the things that they are saying that they're going to do and not do.
Are you aware of an underground site near Tehran called Lavazan 3?
I know that there are a lot of reports. I'm not going to get into what it is that we know about the Iranian nuclear program, but I am confident that our intelligence capabilities are sufficiently robust that we have a good understanding of what the Iranian nuclear program entails.
Well, the reason I ask is Iranian opposition groups say that there is a secret nuclear facility there that we haven't known about.
I think we have confidence that we're aware of the facilities that Iran has right now. And there's going to be a lot of speculation and rumors about other facilities. But again, I am confident that right now we have a good appreciation of what the Iranian nuclear program consists of. What
is the danger of a nuclear arms race across the Middle East? Top Saudi officials, including former Intel chief Prince Turki Al-Faisal, say if there's a deal, that the Sunni nations are going to match whatever it is we allow the Iranians to do? Doesn't that just lead to an arms race?
We've talked with our Gulf partners. We're trying to stay very close in touch with them. And I believe that they do have confidence that the United States is going to be sort of the security guarantor in that region to prevent this type of escalation that's going to include nuclear weapons.
But when you have top Saudi officials saying they are going to match the nuclear infrastructure that we allow Iran to have, doesn't that create an arms race?
We continue to have this close dialogue with them about what it is that we are insisting upon from the Iranians and the verification system there. So I'm confident that the Saudis are going to continue to be a very responsible partner and player in the region.
Which is a greater threat to the U.S., Iran or ISIS?
I think they're both threats.
The reason I ask is Iran's reach, I don't have to tell you, is spreading into Iraq, into Syria, into Lebanon, now into Yemen. General Qasem Soleimani is the head of the Quds force from Iran, is leading the offensive into Crete. Here is what you said recently.
There's an alignment of some interest between ourselves and Iran, clearly, in terms of what ISIL has done there.
Do you really think that the U.S. and Iran share interests?
I think what Daesh ISIL has been doing in the region is something that is counter to U.S. interests as well as counter to Iranian interests. And the Iranians are now engaged with their Iraqi partners to try to push back these forces of terrorism inside of Iraq. So Iran does have an interest in preventing further Daesh ISIL terrorist attacks. At the same time, I think they need to be responsible as far as what they're doing inside Iraq and not further inflaming that situation.
But your immediate predecessor in this job, General David Petraeus, said this week Iran is not an ally, it's part of the problem, not part of the solution. And Benjamin Netanyahu, when he spoke to Congress, said the enemy of your enemy is not your friend, he's your enemy.
Well, I wouldn't say that Iran is an ally right now. What I'm saying is that the Iranians are pursuing their interests inside of Iraq, some of which include efforts against Daesh and preventing that phenomenon from growing.
But the concern is that we're somehow letting Iran back into Iraq and other areas. And I understand that we don't have a veto power, but you know, the concern is that we are letting them play a bigger role.
Well, we're not letting them play that role. I think they're working with the Iraqis to play that role. We're working with the Iraqis as well, and the Iranians are involved. It's a neighboring state. They clearly have interest there. They're pursuing them. Qasem Soleimani, head of the Quds force, is somebody who has been very aggressive, very active. There are many things that Qasem Soleimani is doing that are further destabilizing the situation there. So I wouldn't consider Iran an ally right now inside of Iraq. What I'm saying is that the forces that Daesh has brought to bear in Iraq have generated an Iranian reaction that they need to make sure that they're not pursuing a very parochial and separate agenda from what the Iraqi nation and people need.
General Lloyd Austin, the head of U.S. Central Command, told Congress recently that ISIS is losing. But ISIS is still dug into Iraq and Syria. They now have affiliates across North Africa. They were possibly responsible for these terrible attacks this week in Tunisia and Yemen. Director, can we really say ISIS is losing?
Clearly, ISIS's momentum inside of Iraq and Syria has been blunted, and it has been stopped. So they are not on the march as they were several months ago. And so our working with the Iraqis, and the Iraqis now trying to push back against it, it is having some great, I think, progress. At the same time, this phenomenon of Daesh throughout the entire region is something that we need to work with our partners. We see what's happening in other countries and these franchises that are growing up in Libya and other areas. They've claimed responsibility for attacks in Tunisia and Yemen. This is something that clearly is not just restricted to Iraq and Syria, so we cannot relent. We have to continue working with our partners in the region.
Here is what you said in 2012.
If the decade before 9/11 was the time of al-Qaeda's rise, and the decade after 9/11 was the time of its decline, then I believe this decade will be the one that sees its demise.
Director Brennan, weren't you just flat wrong about that?
No. And when we look at al-Qaeda, and we look what has happened to al-Qaeda, particularly the core of al-Qaeda that was in the area of Afghanistan and Pakistan, they have taken some really big hits.
But respectfully, sir, when you were saying this is the decade of al-Qaeda's demise, I don't think most people thought you meant, well, yes, but there'll be an offshoot called ISIS, which spreads across the Middle East.
This phenomenon that Daesh represents right now is a new one. It is one that has grown up in the past 2 years.
But it's an offshoot of al-Qaeda.
So we've done a lot against al-Qaeda. We've been able to push them back. We've been able to prevent their attacks. But there are these offshoots, as you say. This is a phenomenon that we're going to have to deal with. And I do think over the next decade, this is going to be a long, hard fight.
I guess what I'm asking is, didn't you give the American people, and the President give the American people, a false sense of confidence back in 2012 about our fight against Islamic terrorists at a time, perhaps not so coincidentally, when the President was running for re-election?
What we said was al-Qaeda was on the run. We said that al-Qaeda was really bloodied, and it was not the same organization that it was at 9/11 as well as in the years after that. There was no sense that I think either I or the President or others gave to the American people that terrorism was going away. But we've made great progress against a lot of these groups that had plans in place to carry out attacks.
You talked recently of the ideology, your word, that fuels ISIS. What is that ideology?
It is a very twisted, perverted interpretation of a religion that they purport to represent, but in no way do they represent. It's an ideology of violence. That's what it is. It is not a religious ideology.
Well, Islam is certainly a part of it, isn't it?
They purport to be Muslims, but as I said, the overwhelming majority of Muslims throughout the world roundly denounce and condemn what they're doing. And that's why we should not give them any type of religious legitimacy.
This gets to your refusal and the President's refusal to talk about Islamic extremism. Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, says you can't defeat an enemy unless you define it. And Egyptian President al-Sisi called for a religious revolution recently.
The Muslims have to stand up and correct this misinterpretation and deformed picture of what Islam is.
If ISIS is selling its ideology, its brand, twisted brand of Islam to followers and pulling in recruits, don't you have to confront that?
And we are confronting it.
So why not say this is a perverted form of Islam and here's what we're doing to stop it, and this is why they're wrong about Islam, instead of ignoring that?
No, I think that's exactly what we've said. It is a corruption of the Islamic faith. It is a distortion of it. It does not represent the Muslim community or Islam.
Are you prepared to say they're Islamic extremists?
I'm prepared to say that they're extremists, they're violent terrorists who misrepresent what the Islamic religion is about. Yes, absolutely.
What is your read on Russian President Putin? What are his strategic ambitions?
I think President Putin has a view of what sort of Russia nationalism is, that unfortunately I think he has put some of the personal interests of himself and some of the senior members of the Russian government ahead of the best interests of the Russian people.
Haven't we misread Putin throughout the Ukraine crisis? President Obama kept talking about giving Putin off-ramps, but in a movie on the first anniversary of the invasion, Putin said that he always saw Crimea as part of Russia and that he was even willing to put nuclear forces on alert. He never had any intention of backing down.
I think Mr. Putin has demonstrated that he's going to continue to push as far as what his objectives are inside of Ukraine. And I think it is...
So wasn't it naive to even talk about off-ramps?
No, I think what Mr. Putin himself needs to do is to understand how he can extract himself from this situation, because it is coming at the cost of the Russian economy and Russian people being hurt.
But he's happy with the situation.
I don't believe he's happy with the situation.
As director of the CIA, do you see any indications that Vladimir Putin wants out of Ukraine?
I see that what we need to do is to continue to put pressure on Mr. Putin so that the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian government can have a future that is going to be peaceful, safe, and secure.
But do you see any sign he's looking for an off-ramp?
I think that there are signs that the discomfort that is associated with this is becoming more uncomfortable.